Um, I'm not seeing Erik yet. So let's talk about, I don't know. What's happening, Carla? I'm going to introduce you officially when Erik gets here, but is there anything special, any news from the mayor's office that we should know about?
Oh my God, we're so swamped, it's so crazy, and with the new administration right down the following up Tuesday, it's going to be really interesting to see all the changes, and I'll be interested to hear what Erik has to say. I know his platform is completely in line and in sync with everything that we're trying to do, and certainly will be a pleasure to work with him. And I mean, he is uncontested, right? I think he's the
Yes,
uncontested.
he
Yeah.
essentially is. I mean, he's the
Yeah.
uncontested
He's got more
candidate for,
endorsements than God. I mean, I've never seen so many endorsements from like everybody.
and it just happens to be the district that I'm in.
Yeah,
So,
which
and
is
that
great.
that's how he
It's
came
a
to. That's how he comes to be here. He made one. What do they call it when the candidates get on the phone and call constituents? There's something phone camp.
yeah, there's
It's a word
I
for it. It's trickier than phone campaigning. It's actually something much more descriptive. So he made the mistake of calling me, and he had to listen to a
okay.
10-minute rant from me about why do politicians never talk about the arts? It's like we don't exist in your speeches.
It's really crazy. It's really crazy, isn't it? On every level. During the mayoral debate, I kept thinking, okay, when are they going to talk about culture? And Broadway, yes, people talk about that and they lump it in with tourism, which makes sense
I
for,
heard three references from Garcia. For what was it, Catherine Garcia? No, what was her name?
yeah.
Three references to the arts, and I thought, yes, you have my vote.
I know she was the only one. I think, and Maya might have too, but with the recent
Not
debates,
directly.
yeah,
Maya
it's
didn't.
just
I
a,
mean, Maya was my top choice for mayor, and I was sorry that she didn't fare better. But
yeah.
we this we're gonna actually get less political and more artsy once Eric gets here. Ironically enough, um, but I I'm not sure. Uh, I'm not sure what we're going to do right now. I mean, we have a political climate that is so toxic right now that we know that the theaters are trying to reopen, and there is a certain amount of effort that's being made to help us reopen live theater. Um, I'm not sure whether that's going to solve the core issue, which is the fact that politicians simply don't think about the arts
Well, I
on a
think it's
regular basis.
a misconception about who artists are. I know that, I hear things that people who are really savvy and big, even the people that are real big fans of theater, and when they talk about visual artists, they act as if they're selfish and self-involved, and
Or
they don't,
hobbyists,
give
hobbyists.
back, and they think that the world owes them a favor, and all these misconceptions about how artists work and what they do. One of the things that I think helped during the pandemic was people had to network and get together and advocate together. And I do think that the city and the state are going to have a much better relationship with the new mayor, and NISCA and NEA. NEA's been, a friend of ours as well, but NISCA we've had to kind of keep a distance from, and it will be really nice to really start leveraging funding and support and advocacy as we saw being done by so many different groups.
So Carla, let me ask you something. Are you going to mind saying this all again once I start the YouTube recording?
No, if everyone's probably going to mind hearing it again, um,
So everybody,
but
just so you know, we're all going to be in agreement that Carla can say all this again for the YouTube
I'm not going to
listeners.
remember what I said. I'm just going to have to think about whatever Erik is going to angle. And I'd like to hear what he has to say about this, because I'm kind of on the inside of it, and I always have been on the cultural side of politics and government, or social justice. So I'm seeing it from a different lens. It'll be interesting to see when he comes in with his, he's got a lot of huge things on his platform. He's got homelessness, he's got just
Well, that's the other part of it. It's I don't
yeah.
begrudge the other issues. I don't say that the other social issues that politicians are seemingly passionate about. I say seemingly because one doesn't always know what the truth is.
But
Okay,
affordable housing. I
here
mean,
is
why don't
Erik.
we have more Manhattan plazas? I mean, that's the kind of thing that we need.
So
So it's real estate is a big issue.
Erik is now here. Hi, everybody. It's Bob Ost, and this is Theater Resources Unlimited. It's our Friday community gathering. I hope some of you are familiar with it by now. I hope that some of my YouTube viewers are actually tuning in more than once because I have all sorts of interesting people that come into the room and speak. We try to sure to change it up as much as we can and talk about different things. From my saying this before that this all started April 17th of 2020 because of something called COVID. Remember COVID, everyone? So we were told that we were going into isolation, and I figured, as the guy that's running this organization called True, oh my God, what am I going to do with all my programs? I don't know how to do them virtually. What am I going to do? I did hear rumors that there was something called Zoom, and I did resist that adamantly, kicking and screaming. But I finally realized that this was real. This is something that we had to deal with. We didn't know how long it was going to be. We thought that 2 months was going to be an enormously long time. At some point, we kind of realized that we didn't know when it was going to end. It was just going to be going on and on and on. And I had to either close my business, close Theater Resources Unlimited, or jump in and find a way to be viable during a pandemic. So I started learning how to do Zoom. And I also asked people what they were going through, and everybody was going through the same thing, isolation. We were all isolated. So I asked whether people would want to meet once a week in a room like this and talk about what they were going through, and I got unanimous yes. And so since April 17th, 2020, this is about the 80th consecutive meeting that we're doing today on Friday, October 29th. So we've been talking a lot about isolation and creating an isolation. The conversation has changing finally. The conversation is now moving into I think it's two things. What are we going to do going forward now that live performance is becoming an option? And I think the other part of the conversation for many of us is, what are we going to take out of the year and a half that we spent in isolation moving forward? What lessons have we learned, and what can we apply going forward? Today, I'm going to have two guests who are hopefully going to explore with me an ongoing bugaboo, complaint, thing that I have that just bugs me a lot, and it's long precedes COVID, and it's basically the fact that as hard as I listen to so many politicians, some of whom I admire, some of whom I dread, as hard as I listen to them talk about all the important social issues that are happening in our country and in our society at any given moment, I almost never hear the arts mentioned. And I'm going to ask a couple people who are here with me today why that is. And I'm going to bring them into the room. I'm very pleased to have Carla Hoke-Miller, who is from the Mayor's Office of Media and Entertainment, and Erik Bottcher, who is almost certainly going to be the city council member in my district, District 3, here in New York in Chelsea. Erik, what do you think? What do you think the chances are?
Well, I'm running unopposed in the general election, so I'd have to screw up pretty bad between now and Tuesday. But I really appreciate you having me here today.
I appreciate you coming. And Carla, it's always good to see you. Carla's been an ongoing voice of support for us. I'm very grateful to you. So Erik, what is your feeling about the role of the arts in the economy in general, and also in specifically the New York economy? The reason why this astounds me, this lack of apparent consciousness of the importance of the arts, is because we live in a city and in a state, but it's in a city specifically, New York City, whose economy is driven by the arts, isn't it?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Bob. And thanks again for having me. Just so folks know how I met Bob, when I was running in the Democratic primary, I called thousands of constituents. I called almost every voter in the district, and every day I'd spend hours and hours calling registered voters, and Bob was one of those voters. So we got acquainted that way. And thank you for having me, and thanks for having this group. I think that
Well, I want to add to that he called me, and I proceeded to go into my rant about the art and theater and politics, and then I said, "Aren't you glad you called?" And he was stuck. He was stuck. He called me, and now he's here, and he's going to be part
Well,
of
it was
True.
very fortuitous. And the district I am running in is Council District 3, which is the Village, Chelsea, and Hell's Kitchen. It happens to have one of the highest, if not the highest, concentration of theaters in the world. So in our community, it's vitally important. But I think that the pandemic really made a lot of folks understand, in ways I didn't understand before, how important the arts are to our city. And I think you're right. In many ways, the arts have been taken for granted by many people. But what we saw during the pandemic, when the arts went away, we saw huge numbers of the population flee the city. And I think that the pandemic, there were many reasons why people left the city, but the truth is that New York is an expensive place to live. It's rough around the edges. We put up with a lot to live here, and we all could live somewhere else and have bigger houses and for a lot less money. But one of the reasons that we live here is because of the arts. And one of the reasons why so many people live here is because of the arts. So when you took away the ability of people to go to the arts, to go to see theater, live music, on and off Broadway, you name it, I think that's one reason why many people fled the city. So getting the arts up and running again in a safe way as soon as possible is a key part of the recovery, getting people to come back to New York. If you were thinking about leaving, don't. We need you to stay here. We need you to come back here. We need you to visit here. We need tourists to come back. So aside from the direct economic impact that the arts has, billions and billions of dollars in employment, in all the ancillary benefits to restaurants and everything, it's just a key part of New York. It's part of New York's DNA.
Haven't I read somewhere that the arts are probably the number one source of the economy?
Yeah,
the number one sector in the New York economy.
Yeah, billions and billions of dollars.
Yeah. So that's worth talking about. It seems. I want to come. We're obviously going to come back to you. I want to talk to Carla. Carla, introduce yourself to the room and let them know a little bit about what you do and about the Mayor's Office of Media and Entertainment.
Okay.
And you can throw in anything you want to say about the whole subject of why nobody talks about the arts.
Well, it's changing, and I think Erik makes really good points. Erik, it's nice to meet you. I hadn't met you before, and I'm thrilled to meet you now. And it's nice to be back with the group. I haven't been able to be on for a while. So I think my office is the Mayor's Office of Media and Entertainment, and it basically encompasses the Office of Film, Theater, and Broadcasting, and New York City Media, which is, kind of runs the station in the broadcast end. And we've also, since I've been there in the past 7 years, which they didn't really have a theater department. They have in the past helped with the Broadway load-ins and load-outs, but had worked with the Broadway League and a number of the Broadway theaters in that capacity of the Tonys and things like that. But the small theaters and the not-for-profit sector had kind of fallen only in the Department of Cultural Affairs, who gives them operational and cap funds and capital grants. But I am a big advocate of every sector of theater and everything affecting it, including workforce and education and getting reports done that could give statistics to this group of the economic and cultural impact that we've done for all of the portfolios. So my office basically has, besides those, we have the Office of Nightlife is housed with us. We have a new credentialing office that got taken away from NYPD and coming into MOME, which is the acronym for our office. And that is for the press credentials. They'll be coming out of our office. So we had to, during the pandemic, on top of everything else, we had to create a credentialing office, and the commissioner had to go out and hire staff and get space and do all this. So that's going to be probably, I think, active really soon, I think in January. And so, but basically we're the B2B, we're the business to business end of the creative industry. So we try to grow awareness, really advocate for inclusion, and all of the things that, affordable housing and all of the things that Erik is charged with attending to affect us, of course, and all the artists that live here. And we were talking about how artists, one of the things that did happen during the pandemic, which was really interesting, is the network that we had expanded phenomenally, because we were working with health and hospitals, we were working with education, we were working with feeding people. There were all kinds of really innovative things that happened, but the disparity, between those that could do remote learning and those couldn't. I mean, all the things that it brought up on the downside that have to be addressed in real time. Also, kind of for the first time, unemployment went to gig workers. They were recognized in a way they never had been by.
And we say gig workers because that refers to artists as well as others.
Independent contractors.
Yeah.
Yes. And that artist vocations were taken seriously as as a profession. And so,
as a former freelancer who did a lot of work in the arts, it was amazing how much I had to do to justify any money I was making from my art for many years on my taxes. It was really they put you through the mill. You have you have to prove so much. It's like, okay, I really mean it when I say I'm a playwright, and I'm sorry I don't make more money than I do. I really am sorry.
And why do you have all those deductions if you're not producing a play right now? I know.
Yeah.
So I think it's understood more, and I think it brought awareness to it. And also we were really fought to include in the state's definitions that small theaters are small businesses. And so they were able to apply for PPE, for SFOG money, for, it was a unified, something that I spoke of a little bit earlier, the unification of the federal, the state, and the city government entities and organizations and institutions and foundations to really work together to try to represent and advocate for the people that we had lost and were losing because of the pandemic. So
let's look at a couple of the specific things that are happening right now. We'll talk about what is happening before we start talking about what's not happening. There's a specific program to reopen venues. Does one of you want to talk about the venue program and the
shuttered venues? The
shuttered venues, yes, it's SVOG, SVOG. Yeah. One of you
go ahead, Carla.
Okay, well, it was basically, it was asked for by Americans for the Arts and by NIA, which is the National Industry Music Venues. I'm not NEVA. So it's okay. All the venues that have been closed down, from the small music venues throughout the 5 boroughs to Carnegie Hall and all the big institutions. They all got together and wrote a white paper saying how the pandemic had affected them and what they needed. And they used that as a tool to really push for funding from the federal level, to get federal dollars to cover every kind of cost that were incurred while shuttered businesses were suffering so much, and people had lost their employees. They weren't able to operate. They were prevented and prohibited because of COVID protocols. not to open. And so, and the landlords needed the rent. It was all like a trickle down domino effect. So there had to be some kind of major effort made to get real money and real dollars. And they actually, it went through Congress and it was approved, and they got millions of dollars that went out for people to apply to this. And I know that, as well as the big organizations that got millions of dollars in lost income and also helped with reopening again, a lot of the little guys that didn't even have a venue space but had been part of a company or a group were able to apply and get funding from that. And so it was kind of
Let it be said, not everybody successfully got funding, but at least there was an initiative out there to help one of the key components of theater, which is the venues. One of the things that I don't think has happened is rent forgiveness for a lot of these people and individuals as well. We're solving part of a problem. We're delaying debt for a lot of people. Erik, do you have any thoughts about what could be done better than that, or is this the way it has to be?
Rent forgiveness and folks falling into debt with on rent, both residential and commercial, has been a huge problem, and it's something that we've it's a can that we've kicked down the road, both with the residential eviction moratorium that's scheduled to end in January. I'm just terrified at what's going to happen when the eviction moratorium is lifted. They're predicting a surge in homelessness, and that's just going to be unbelievably tragic. But also a lot of commercial tenants, including arts tenants, have racked up a lot of debt, and the state programs to deal with this have largely been residential. There may be components to it that will help commercial tenants, but a lot of the programs are low interest loans, which doesn't really help.
Doesn't solve the problem.
Yeah, we're talking about a need for grants. So it's a big issue that is going to need to be dealt with on the state, city, and federal level. And in January, we're going to have a whole new city government with a new city council, a new mayor, new borough presidents, district attorneys, a new comptroller, and a nearly new governor. So it's a whole another government taking over. And this is one of the things that is going to be on our agenda, is commercial rent.
Do you have any specifics, areas that you? I think you are slightly more aware of the arts than a lot of other politicians in our city. Not only because of where you are, but I think that you are a supporter of the arts. Am I right in saying that?
I am, and during my primary run, I was endorsed by all the unions that represent the arts, that endorse in council races, and before being elected, I was chief of staff to Corey Johnson for the last 7 years. So we worked closely with the League of Independent Theaters, Local 802, IATSE 1, Local 817, Local 829. And I've been in touch with them about the way forward. And going forward, the way to navigate these issues is to bring them and other stakeholders to the table, quite literally and physically to the table with government. And, I'm a firm believer that government doesn't always have the answers. We have to look to the people who are doing this work, who are in day-to-day communication with artists, with venue owners, with performing arts companies, and look to them and ask them, what do you need from your government right now? And that's something starting in January that I want to work really hard at. Whoever the arts and culture Cultural Affairs Committee chair is in the city council. We don't know yet who the next speaker of the city council is going to be. We don't know who the different chairs of the various committees are going to be, but one of the Cultural Affairs Committee is going to be very important. I want to help bring the people from our district into the room with the people who are going to be making very important decisions about what to do going forward on these issues.
I'm glad you mentioned our friends at League of Independent Theater. Amy and Chris are good friends, and they've been here and spoken for us as well. Advocacy for the arts is a very tricky thing. As a 501c3, I can't advocate. I can't appear political. So I'm glad that Chris and Amy can do it for so many of us. I guess it's a long story there. So are there any other things, Carla and Erik, that you can think of that might be useful in reopening theater that we haven't already talked about? I mean, we know that there are COVID restriction protocols in place, and the COVID protocols so far seem not to be dampening the spirits of theater goers. That they seem to be coming out. Do you know any differently than that? Are theater goers willingly coming out and masking and showing their vaccination status and all that?
You go first, Carla.
Okay, yes, they are, but it's really local and metro area, and industries like Broadway depend primarily on tourists, and there are lots of new plays that have opened that are struggling. I think it's wonderful because a lot of people that never would have gotten to Broadway before have gotten to Broadway and had their plays viewed by a number of people to very enthusiastic audiences. And I haven't seen, things have gone very smoothly on Broadway in some of the smaller theaters and venues that are opening from what I can tell. And I went to the Joyce Theater opening just to see what was happening with dance, and it was packed and everyone kept their masks on and everyone is vaccinated that's coming in. And it's really encouraging because, London had to close down twice, and it's so expensive for people to reboot. And so we've been very lucky in the way that I think that the regulations have rolled out and how strict they are. I think it's very helpful. But I do think that I know a lot of theaters that have been closed out that are not being invited back into the spaces that they had. I know there's new, kind of like the Art New York is changing its protocols and making it a wider, so that theaters can have longer runs and have their seasons and use the rehearsal space and lockdown space, which they didn't used to do. It was more of an alternate kind of thing. So there's a lot of people that are working to house the people that don't have a housing for their productions right now. The York Theater has not been invited back into St. Peter's Church.
Well, that's a specific problem. I mean, they had a flood there, so that's
they did, and that's being worked on. But Gonzalo from Cultural Affairs has been doing letters of support for theaters to say, the city is really behind them coming back, and the city is behind efforts to keep these theaters going, and to keep finding new places for their productions to be housed. But I think it's an enormous problem, and there's a lot of empty space. Everyone's saying, why can't the city does have some empty spaces, and we're trying to find a new home for some of the vintage costume house that was displaced from Long Island City. Possibly there will be a city-owned building in Long Island City that could be moved to.
Is that in addition to the TDF costume collection?
Yeah, well, they're at the Kaufman Studios. They're fine.
Okay.
They didn't. Yeah, this is the private little costume shops where the Costume Industry Coalition was formed to kind of address this. They're the small businesses.
Boy, aren't you the right guest for me? You know more than I do.
Well, the Showstoppers is wonderful. If you guys haven't gone, they put this on, and it's all costumes. They have in-house demonstrations with embroiderers and with the people building the costumes for Lion King, and it's Christensen's his group kind of put it together, and Brian Blythe is really proactive. So it was really interesting to me because they weren't part of a union, and so he formed this kind of guild coalition that's putting them on the map. He's a good one to watch as someone who's presented a good model on how to make awareness, build awareness, and get real results and backing from people about something that wasn't really on the radar, on anyone's radar, about these small costume shops that supply not just for theater, but film, comedy, Saturday Night Live, TV. It's such a staggered industry that the pandemic just showed all of the bones of the skeleton that create the body. And for the first time,
in coming back, I mean, it's been a process. It hasn't just like boom, we're back. For a while, we were doing street theater, and I think we're still doing open air performances, though probably not when it's getting colder. Can you, Erik? Are you aware of the what was that program called?
Open culture, open streets.
Okay. Yeah, open culture, open streets.
Yeah, open culture, open streets, big success, and something that was such a big success. Something that I believe is permanent going forward.
Okay, so it will be going forward. I know it was.
I understand.
It seemed like a transitional step at one point, but I guess it's. How is it different from the street performance that we've had in the past pre-COVID? Is it just a little bit more organized and more? There were, what is it, 228 streets or something like it? What is the number?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Carla would probably know this, but the main difference from what I understand is that before, one could, you couldn't charge money in a public place. And this permits people to actually do performances in the street and in other places and charge in a way that they couldn't before. That's one of the main distinctions, right, Carla?
Yeah, it was actually a great idea because people that were shut out of their venues didn't have any way to make money other than virtual. And there was a need to perform and a need to keep their followers, intact. So it was an initiative of Ben Bramer's, and it basically, the citywide events management company, which is SAPO, is under that. The street permitting agency is under that. We all work together along with Department of Transportation and Cultural Affairs to come up with an application process that would really help. And so it was established that they could charge money for tickets, but anybody that was walking by, because it was a public street, of these designated 228 streets, would be allowed to watch as well. But if you had a ticketed performance, you could put out 50 chairs for your ticketed guests or something. There were ways of doing it, but you had to barricade the street yourself. You had to put out no parking signs. A lot of it fell on
and also, as we've heard from previous meetings, some people had to find ways of bringing in lights, which is not
it's a little complicated, but it's a really great first start, and it was a real. I know Lit had worked really hard to advocate for this, for some way for buskers to earn money, and they talked about different ideas of doing maybe a permit, and so they basically got this going from the very start, which I'm very proud of them for doing. But it's also led to it being permanent. And it also gave for extended permit. So you could permit for every Saturday. You could put in a permit, say an arts group like Pergonas could put in a permit so they could have not necessarily Saturday, every Thursday they could perform. So they could do a series basically. And it used to be that you could only get a one-time permit, and it was really restrictive. And this was restrictive. You could have a stage or you could have sound. You couldn't have both. So we've done a lot of off-Broadway in the boroughs productions during COVID, where we brought whole productions out and staged them. And that's been really great. Our office has done that, and also virtual stuff. But
Erik, you're right in the heart of the theater that's everything in the city. I mean, the Chelsea Hell's Kitchen, that's Broadway, that's off Broadway. Um, I just want to for a second. I want to just separate the threads. We talked a little bit. We've touched on Broadway commercial productions and how they seem to be getting audiences. We haven't really specifically talked about off Broadway. We've implied off Broadway, and then there's all the small theaters. Carla, you were talking about a lot of the theater companies that are homeless right now, and that you're trying to find homes for them. Those are not-for-profit theater companies,
Yeah.
small, medium. What size are we talking?
I'd say small to medium,
Small to medium.
but more people are actually doing hybrids and doing programming. And as you know, a lot of people made more money doing hybrid galas than they did when they did them in person and had to orchestrate a lot What right?
Our Zoom
So
Zoom gala was
yeah,
spectacular. It was
and
a
they're
great
flexible.
success.
It's so
So
great.
Erik, what are some of the venues in Chelsea that have been hit harder than others? Are you aware of where of theaters that have come and gone, and
Um,
which ones are struggling?
the Upright Citizens Brigade left their space on 25th and
Right.
8th. Um,
Around the
and
corner for me.
I'm sorry.
It's around the corner for me.
Yeah,
Where I live.
I believe that they also left um, uh,
Didn't they, were
improv
they in,
group left on 42nd
yeah,
Street.
555 West 42nd Street. But that was taken over by Eric Krebs. So I want to
Yeah,
actually specifically say to you, Eric, be nice to Eric Krebs. He's got the same name as you, but also he does amazing work for the community. He gives people an opportunity to have their work done that other people don't offer a
that's
chance to.
great.
So
That's really good to
555
know.
West 42nd Street. Give them lots of support.
Great.
Yeah.
Really helpful to know. Thank you.
Um, and in terms of your own experience with theater going and the arts, what is I shouldn't assume that you're a theater guy. What is your art of choice? Like if you were going to go out and be cultural, how
I
would you do it?
like musical theater.
Yay!
I like musical theater a lot. Uh, I like live music. I like plays, but I get much more engaged when there's musical elements to it. That's my personal preference.
Well, just so you know, I write musicals, but I also write plays, so I
Sure.
straddle both worlds.
You
Um,
covered it.
the thing that I wanted to really mention is we've been talking to people in London lately. We're trying to partner with some companies that also do networking in London. So I've had conversations, and I've been made extremely aware of the fact that there's incredible amount of government support of the arts in the UK. That a lot of these plays, the plays are the ones that are harder to get audiences for in general. I mean, musicals are basically the brand of Broadway. And Jane Duba, don't scream at me for saying that. I'm just basically trying to be realistic about the fact that plays need more help. In London and in the UK in general, plays get more help. There are ways of partnering with the government and getting support so that. And the other thing that's different here than in London, New York theater and American culture is a home run culture. If you don't hit a home run, you're not a success. And it makes a lot of us nuts. But in London, there is room for smaller levels of success. Things are still considered successful without having to be Wicked or Phantom of the Opera or Lion King, or these huge things. Do you think our government is ever going to wake up and say, "Hey, maybe theater would be something that's worth supporting"?
Well, let me just say that I think with the NEA
I've
and with
stunned you. I've stunned this poor man.
no,
Oh, I
I think
thought
with the
Carla. Yeah,
NEA
go for it, Carla.
and Department of Cultural Affairs, they fund thousands, hundreds of thousands of companies and artists And so it might not just be the play, but we don't have a national system like London. We don't have the dole. We don't support people when unemployment runs out, they're off. You know, we don't have a system of national public funding the way they do. We have this individual idea of every man for himself, every woman for herself, and every person for themselves. And it's in our history that this kind of post-capitalism where we find ourselves now, the first glimpse we ever got of our government really helping anyone that needed help, more so than ever before, happened during the pandemic. And it's going to be very hard for people to think of going back to the model of you're on your own again. I mean, it's how, so I think it starts with that kind of system, but the London system is fantastic. I mean, I wish we had that kind of government, but it's a vast, it's vastly
We don't
different.
even have a government that can pass any kind of law right now. Nothing's happening right now.
Yeah.
Eric,
And it highlights why
as Erik Bottcher, not as a future council member, just tell me about what your thoughts are about how we can make theater and the arts in general a little bit easier for us artists.
we've been on the defensive on a national level for so many years, trying to protect the NEA and other programs that when I was growing up, they were just celebrated, funding National Endowment for the Arts and other programs.
Now they're looked at with disdain and
Yeah, and what's happening with the Republican Party nationally and elsewhere, we've been playing defensive for so long. I think we need to retake the narrative and just be so clear about how important the arts are to the economy, to our country, and to our city and state. And here in New York City, we've been able to increase funding, but I'm going to fight to do even more for the reasons that you said. But in addition to direct funding of the arts, we have to make life easier for artists in all aspects of life. And that means providing healthcare options, providing options for saving for retirement. I favor savings accounts for independent contractors and others. You shouldn't have to have a W-2, work as a salaried employee to get to be able to save for retirement with pre-tax dollars, or work for the government, or be part of a union program. You should be able to be an independent artist and have options to save for retirement and put aside pre-tax dollars. So many different things that the government could be doing to make things easier for artists to just live and have careers with that can support themselves and their families and retire comfortably.
thank you for that.
Yeah.
I hope some things can change. I hope over the next maybe decade.
I think what
Nothing changes.
I just want to respond to Jane said off-Broadway and off-Broadway are almost all plays, and these are all shows in your district. I like plays. I don't want anyone to think I said I didn't like plays. I'm just saying when I go to see something, it tends to be a musical. That's all. But
Hey Jane, there were plenty
like
plenty of off-Broadway musicals as well. I mean, we got the Regina Comet right now, and we had Stranger Sings, and there's been plenty of singing down here in Chelsea and the Village. But your district also covers the theater district, doesn't it? Or
it does.
Yeah. So yeah, Jane is just so you know, Jane is one of the producers of Is This a Room and Dana H, which are running in repertory at the Lyceum Theater.
Oh, great.
I was there at this is a room on Tuesday night. It was a packed
Oh,
house, and it was a
such a great play.
huge response at the end. The audience was extremely enthusiastic and cheering at the end. Um, I also know that that these days a lot of times people are cheering at the end of shows just because they're in the theater. It's like, oh
Yep.
my God, I'm here. Thank
Best
you.
audiences I've ever seen in my life. And they're talking back, which is, I was in Thoughts of a Colored Man, and the characters on the stage are having this conversation. Two of them. One is a well-to-do man who's had a kind of a history with the young man he sees in the supermarket, who's pushing carts around, and they have a conversation, and he says, you know, I thought you were the genius, and he said, I'm paraphrasing, and he said, well, the young man said, I did get a scholarship. And he said, where'd you get you got a scholarship? Why didn't you take it? And he said, my mother was sick and I couldn't do it. And he said, where was your scholarship? And where'd you get the scholarship? And he said, MIT. And the other character said, the MIT. And a woman in the audience next to us said, no, the other one. So people, it's really active. The audience is super charged and commenting and throwing out comments in a way I haven't seen on Broadway
Well, the
ever.
significant thing of
So
Thoughts of a Colored Man is that it's one of seven plays by
yes,
BIPOC playwrights and predominantly BIPOC producers and production.
huge
And
difference.
yeah,
But we got to sustain that. See, what I worry about is that these things have been highlighted, and economics, all the Republicans living in New York who have gotten rich here, they want culture to come back because they want people to come back. And so they want the markets to come back. And so once that comes back, are the arts going to be forgotten again, where the artists will be like, they didn't have anything to do with this recovery, really. It was all us. It was all our businesses and our corporations. So we have to really fight that kind of stigma against artists. As Erik said, yeah, the NEA and public television and so many of these entities that were heralded as saviors are just, kind of pushed down by the Netflix and the bigger.
well, we
Not
have
that
we have a
Netflix
political party that is essentially would like to shut down the NEA altogether. I don't know why. I don't
Yeah,
know what they have against it. I don't get it. But it's a
a
reality that
lot we can't understand.
we face every day.
We'll
Um,
never understand
so
that element.
basically, we've talked about a couple of different things. I just want to sort of pull the threads a little bit here. So we talked about the one federal effort that I know to support the arts, and that's funding for small venues. Um, we talked about Erik. You talked about how, one of you talked about how the fact that independent contractors, i.e., artists and others, were finally made eligible for unemployment benefits during COVID, which was a great boon. It actually helped. It helped my husband pay off dental bills. So
Great.
we were very grateful for that. I'm trying to think what else am I missing? Let me turn to the room. You guys out there, what am I not asking that we should ask now that we have the opportunity to have the ear of Erik Bottcher and Carla Hoke-Miller? So I'll keep talking until somebody raises a hand. So the I know what we didn't touch on. Arts and education. Why are the arts not better supported, more supported in schools? Why are school programs that are cut always the first ones that are cut are the arts? Any thoughts about why that is and whether we can change that, Erik?
I'll take a stab at that. One factor has been the fact that we've become very data driven in our education system, and measuring success or failure by test scores, attaching funding to test scores, and making the jobs of teachers and administrators dependent on test scores. That has disadvantaged arts education, because you can't, if you're not testing on arts education when the budget is tight, it's the first thing to go. I think that's one reason.
How can we stop that? What can we do?
Well, we've worked really hard here in New York City to push back on that. And in the city council, we fund here in Council District 3, we allocate city council discretionary money to programs in our schools to increase after school programs like the cultural after school adventures, where we bring in nonprofits to work with kids, and also this year in Albany, the state budget increased funding for education statewide in a significant way. That's money that will be going to schools across the state and here in New York City, and will be available for them to use in different ways. Hopefully, many schools will use that money and bring on music teachers that they haven't had in many years, in addition to things like school counselors.
You see, that's where I'm worried. That's where I'm worried. I'm trying to figure out what's happened in our country. It's an erosion of respect for the arts that starts very young. So when people get funding for educational programs, the first place they go is not to the arts. They go to sports. They go to, I mean, well, let's just say they go to sports and leave it there. But how do we change this? It's so important that we start training our young people to appreciate the arts. For some of them, it could possibly be a blessing, an amazing opportunity for them to discover themselves and discover who they are. And we've just basically shut it out for so many populations. What can we do?
Both. You have to offer sports, you have to offer arts, you have to offer academics, math, and I truly believe that we can do and must do all the above.
Is there a way of formalizing that, of putting it into a policy statement? This is money that we're giving to you, and we'd like to see it split evenly among different areas of activity?
In January, when Mayor, ostensibly, given the pending the outcome of Tuesday's election, when Mayor Eric Adams takes office, he will appoint a new chancellor. And in New York City, because of mayoral control, the mayor and the chancellor have a great deal of power over New York City schools. And that's something that we should engage them about, what they can do to ensure that funds are spent to increase arts education across the board.
Because right now it really falls on the after-school programs that are run by not-for-profits, which are really extensive. I mean, it's pretty amazing and foundations that support programs and workforce programs that we're involved in, and others that are introducing arts jobs and training and backstage training in theater, for instance, to populations of kids that wouldn't have even known that there was a place for them in theater. We just had worked with Situation Interactive, who does the TEDx Broadway and the Broadway Com.
Damien.
With Damien. We worked with him to put together this whole career day, and it was virtual with 3 different tracks, supposed to happen yesterday. And they went through a perfect rehearsal. This is the tried and true disaster. And as soon as they started with the real program, that was a 12 to 5 o'clock with probably 100 amazing panelists that are working in the theater, and they can give this little bit of time. The whole platform blew out, and they couldn't get anything on. And so they postponed the whole thing. I'll let you know when it's happening again. But efforts like that are happening all over. And whenever we see an effort like that, we fund it. Eric, I'd love to work with you and talk with you more and get our offices, together even more than they have been on issues that we support but it is true that it's a time to change it within the schools, because right now there's English teachers teaching theater and buying their own, all the materials that they need for their classes out of their own pockets.
We're going to lose Erik at 6:30 because he has another meeting to go to. But Marlene Tabor, you have
I have
your
a
hand up.
children's Halloween costume contest to go to. It's much better than a meeting.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, fun.
Marlene, did you want to ask a question?
I want to say something. Yes, I do. I've been doing a lot of work with the communities that are not professionally in the theater, and it's been really therapeutic.
Marlene, fast, because we're going to lose him in 1 minute.
Okay, what I think is that somebody has to put together a study of the damage that is done when you take away the arts. I have a dissertation in this. And if you take the arts away and you get rid of empathy and you focus only on technology, it's very, very dangerous. And someone has to present those studies to the government, because they understand fear, but they don't understand a lot of other things. And that's really true. So that's what I have to say, because I've done this. I have written a dissertation on it. And I've been working with the community on my own.
So the question is, how does one disseminate a dissertation of this sort, so in a way that would be meaningful, so that people would actually be paying attention to it and reading it? I can't continue the conversation with you right now, though, Marlene.
All right, that's okay, but I wanted to present it.
Okay, so Glenn Border says theater venues are getting COVID money, but what about producers with a show? How do we apply for that funding and take it to venues? So yeah, that's something I was going to actually ask before. Yes, the small venue funding is great, but what about other producers? How do other producers survive a year and a half of being shut down and having no income, and be able to get the rest of theater up and running in a more vibrant way? Any thoughts?
Something
There's a gap,
Carla,
definitely.
yeah, Carla could probably speak to that in a detailed way, but what I'd like to say before I go is that, Carla, I really, really look forward to working with you. And Bob, you bringing me and Carla together was a big, big thing. So really appreciate you doing that. So Carla, let's talk and meet very early in January. I'd like that very much.
Me too. Wonderful.
Thank
Let's see
you.
what we can do.
Yes, thank you very much, Bob. And speaking of theater, I just want to show my Halloween costume I had on. This was me like right before I came on here. You see if you can guess who I...
Could it be Lincoln?
Maybe. Yes.
That's great.
So we all have a little theater in us, right? Thank you, everybody.
Fun, Erik.
Take care.
Thanks, Abe.
Bye-bye.
It was great meeting you. Thanks for being with us. I appreciate
Likewise.
it.
Thank you.
So Carla, now it's you and me. We can take questions from the room, and RK Green wants to know, is there assistance for marketing off Broadway? I mean, there really isn't any program other than the small venue funding program. I don't know of any other programs. Are there?
Well, the way that we've done it, and we're going to put forth all of the programming that we've been building these past 7 years to the new mayor, and basically try to, at the beginning of the administration, knowing that there's a great deal of ambition and there's more money flowing into programming, we're going to really try to push this, because we do a huge, because our office does the promotion you'll see in the subways for the film industry, that it's part of the city's obligation, matching the tax credit that's given to filming by Albany from the state. And so the city's part is to do the promotion. So we take parts of that and put it into our programming whenever that's available and whenever I can get a budget for it. So we did All New York's a Stage before the pandemic, which was basically building a website. We worked with ShowScore to do it at the time. That showed everything that was happening.
ShowScore's closed.
ShowScore's been taken over by Today's Ticks, I think. So I'm not sure what's happening there.
I liked ShowScore. I thought it was a very good resource.
Yeah, so they did, kind of the peer-to-peer reviews that were really, really helpful. But we took a page, we built a page with them, funded this whole campaign that used bus shelters and subway ads to promote all of the local theaters and companies and anybody's website who wasn't doing anything. So we just tried to list everything that was happening in October of 2019. So what we're going to try to do, because now that tourism is such a big part of this, we're using that to our advantage to try to get, we're working a lot with NYC and Company. We're working with economic development agencies and trying to really pull together a big promotional push beginning in January with APAP, who we support, Jan Arts, which is the 9 festivals around that. And then also do a citywide campaign where you'll see, there'll be access to driving everybody to the website to try to see what's available
Just so you
in
know,
their
Carla,
neighborhood.
I've been waiting for Sue Noseworthy to get back with me and tell me when she can come and speak for us, because I wanted to have APAP on here.
Yeah.
I would have had her with you and Eric. That would have been interesting, actually. Do you have a time constraint right now?
For me,
Yeah.
I have like 10 more minutes.
Okay, so
You're going to do breakouts?
No, I was going to do questions from the room. Ava, do you want to ask your question? Unmute yourself. Ava Lopez was asking, what funding stream is there for community-based arts programs? I mean, everybody's asking about different funding streams that I'm not sure whether they're there or not. Is there a funding stream for community-based arts programs that you know of?
Well, we've provided, for instance, I mean, it's ad hoc in a way. We're responding to what the community and what the artists need and what theaters tell us they need. So a lot of it has been responding during the pandemic to things that we're already doing. For instance, we supplemented Department of Cultural Affairs operating funds grants. They're second parts of those grants that were going to organizations. And we highlighted the theaters in the 25 theaters most in need with the lowest budgets, and 25 of them who were in the locations hardest hit by the pandemic. We worked with Department of Cultural Affairs to identify them, and we added $10,000 to their regular funding from Department of Cultural Affairs to help with COVID compliance and anything that they wanted to spend it on. I'm pushing really hard to make this something that my office does on a regular basis that people could apply for. We do work with Art New York. That depends on the new mayor, honestly. And I think we can leverage more with the state and federal.
Let me ask you this. Let me ask you a brutal question. How arts friendly do you think Eric Adams is?
He understands the economics of what culture and arts bring to the city. It's up to us to educate him. I think that he seems open to it. The people that I know that have had conversations with him, he is willing to listen and understand. We have lots of studies and stats, and we have lots of working groups that we can put him in touch with, including you guys. We'll figure out some kind of coalition so that the message is really strong. But we have a really good track record of all of our programs that we've invested in have been extremely effective. And they are leading toward changes that during the pandemic, we had a whole networking system where we could find out what was needed and how to get there and who was doing what and who could do things, because we had already been invested in the community of the arts and creative arts.
So one thing on our to-do list is educate Eric Adams, who will probably be our new mayor. Ava Lopez, did you want to ask your question now that you're on
Yes, no, I just wanted, I'm sorry, you had muted me, so I needed to get unmuted. But I just wanted to sort of echo what the other young woman had mentioned about the conversation around the arts, because a lot of the conversation has been connected to tourism. But the piece I think that is missing is this conversation around the importance of theater and the arts in terms of the mental well-being of New Yorkers. And so and so a lot of the work, the City Arts Corps program, I remember taking place, really allowed artists that were already in working class and more low income communities that were working with in those areas, creating artwork, to sort of focus on how COVID had impacted those areas. So I know that we sort of put money in there to support that work, but I think that it also showed a gap in what has been going on traditionally, in terms of ensuring that communities are really being sustained artistically and supported so that they have creative capacity. And so that's the piece that I think, and I'm wondering if there are ways in which both state government and city government and the local politicians can really help to continue to let that thrive and be sustainable, because that's been I think it's been a challenge, and it's also showing what has been missing for some time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Carla, I mean, I guess basically this just we'll listen to this input and think about ways of getting the word out to people. I'm not sure whether I got a specific question out of you, Ava, but I was happy to hear you speak.
I would just respond to Ava quickly and just say what we're finding is some of the things that were done with federal money that we've been able to do, like the City Artist Corps, with federal money going to Department of Cultural Affairs so they could do this extra funding. We are pushing for those to continue, just like the open culture to continue, the open restaurants, because the restaurant industry is asking that 30% of their income is coming from these things. People are making added income from these extra funded programs, and they're really making people in the city, they're the things that are activating the city. And then if you have an activated city and people feel safe, and things start running smoothly, and there are people back on the streets enjoying themselves and eating out and going to theater, people are going to come back from all over.
Yes.
And those people will get rewarded because they're seen now. I really believe that, and that's something we're working really hard to trumpet.
So I think that we're going to let Carla go, because I'm sure she has to do something. I've not done. All I have to do is go cook dinner. But what I want to say to everybody is my usual end of the gathering speech. We do this as a service. We have to pay bills. So
Can I jump off?
Yes,
now?
and Carla, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much, everyone, and Bob and everyone for having me. And it was wonderful meeting Erik. We're going to do some good stuff together. So
I was hoping that might happen.
Thank you.
Okay.
And with all of you, good luck with everything that everyone is doing.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
So everybody, you can start coming back into the room now. You can put on your videos. And I just want to say to everybody and to my YouTube listeners that, as I was starting to say, we do this for free, and you can come for free. But we have to have some money coming in if we're going to be able to keep doing what we're doing. So do think about giving us a donation if you can. If you can't, you're still welcome to be here and be part of the community. And YouTube viewers, @maybe join us in the room itself on a Friday at 5 o'clock. Email me at trunltd@aol.com, and we'll put you on the Zoom list. And check us out on TRU Online, True Online, truonline.org. And thanks for being with us.